Welcome back. I hope you had a good break and are ready to jump back into grammar, specifically infinitives. In the gerunds review, we looked at what gerunds are and how to use them in our writing. In this lesson, we're going to look at infinitives in a similar way. As a quick review, do you remember what part of speech gerunds are? If you guessed nouns, you're correct. Just as gerunds act like nouns in sentences, so too can infinitives. This means that infinitives can appear in sentences as subjects, objects, and so on. But where a gerund is a base verb plus ing, an infinitive is usually to plus a base verb. This is not always true because sometimes we use what's called a bare infinitive, or the base verb without to, in a sentence. We'll discuss this more in a little bit. Let's try a new verb, reduce. As we saw in the previous slide, you can use to plus the base verb to make an infinitive. If I want to use an infinitive as my subject, it's usually going to be at the beginning of the sentence. So here we have the example, to reduce gun violence is the main goal for the African Union. The infinitive is to reduce, but to determine the subject, we need to know what we are reducing. To complete this infinitive phrase, we need to include gun violence. This makes is the verb, the main goal, the complement, and, for the African Union, a prepositional phrase. While having infinitives as subjects is grammatically possible, we often don't use them here because the sentence can sound too formal and out of place for many situations. However, in many government documents, it is acceptable to use infinitives as subjects to highlight the formality and seriousness of the document's content. We can use the same infinitive as an object as well. Let's look at the next sentence. The African Union wants to reduce gun violence across the continent. In this sentence, the subject is the African Union, and the verb is wants. We know that the pattern is someone, a noun, wants, a verb, something, another noun. So, this makes to reduce the infinitive, and the infinitive phrase, to reduce gun violence, followed by the prepositional phrase, across the continent. The final type of infinitive is called a bare infinitive. Verbs like help, make, and let are followed by the simple form of a verb, not an infinitive. For example, in the sentence, the African Union is helping people improve their lives. The subject is the African Union, followed by the helping verb is helping. What comes right after is the object people. But notice that the word improve does not have to in front of it. Therefore, you do not have to say the African Union is helping people to improve their lives. You can instead say the African Union is helping people improve their lives. We're going to take a look at several charts here over the next few slides. The first chart here is a list of common verbs that are always followed by infinitives. You will probably recognize many of these verbs and use them regularly, since they are used in everyday speaking and writing. Notice here that we have verbs like agree, choose, demand, deserve, offer, and so on. But you may come across other verbs that will be more specific to government document writing. This next chart is a list of verbs that can be followed by either gerunds or infinitives with little to no change in meaning. This means that you can use either a gerund or an infinitive in your sentence, and the reader will understand your sentence in only one way. For example, the sentence is, the AU continued to work on their 2020 campaign, silencing the guns, during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the sentence, the AU continued working on their 2020 campaign, silencing the guns, during the COVID-19 pandemic, read the exact same way. It does not matter to the reader whether you use the gerund or the infinitive here. This last chart is a list of verbs that can be followed by either gerunds or infinitives, but the meanings of each sentence are very different from each other. This means you have to think carefully about how you write your sentences and what meaning you want your readers to get from your writing. The verb stop is one of my favorites for this type of exercise. When you read the sentences, Nancy stopped taking notes at the meeting, and Nancy stopped to take notes at the meeting. Do you notice a difference? In the first sentence, we are saying that Nancy had been taking notes at the meeting, but then she stopped that activity completely. Here, we are emphasizing that there was an action in progress that did not continue after a certain point. What about the second sentence? Nancy stopped to take notes. So, she was doing some other activity first, but she quit doing this activity, whatever it was, to start taking notes. Each of the verbs in this chart works similarly in that the gerund and the infinitive following the verb have very different meanings.